After the massacre, Earth announced, "We're done being civilized." Part 2. The quiet before 3 months passed after Colony Hana burned. The galaxy waited for humanity to surrender. Earth went silent. No diplomatic messages. No assembly attendance. No responses to the Velith demands. Human ships stopped traveling through alien space. Human colonies closed their borders. Trade agreements went unanswered. The other species talked among themselves. Surely, they said, the humans were broken. Such as soft people could not handle such loss. They were probably crying in their homes, writing sad poetry, preparing their surrender with heavy hearts. They could not have been more wrong. Deep beneath the mountains of Earth, Admiral Kim Do-hyun stood in a room that officially did not exist. Around him were screens showing production numbers, training statistics, and weapons designs. Beside him stood Director Cho Mi-ri, a woman with cold eyes and a brilliant mind. "Protocol Ember is fully active," she said. "All facilities are operational." Do-hyun nodded slowly. Protocol Ember was a secret that every human government had kept for 200 years. It was a plan for total war, created during humanity's last great conflict against itself. Back then, they had pulled back from the edge, just in time. They had locked away their most terrible weapons and sworn never to use them again. That promise was about to break. "Show me," Do-hyun said. Cho Mi-ri led him through the facility. Each room held horrors that humanity had tried to forget. Kinetic. Bombardment platforms that could drop metal rods from orbit with the force of nuclear weapons. Biological agents designed to target specific DNA. Artificial intelligence systems built for one purpose: to hunt and kill with perfect efficiency. Nano-weapons that could eat through any material. Psychological warfare systems that could break minds without touching bodies. All of this had been created centuries ago, when humans fought each other. Now it was being updated with alien technology, made stronger, made deadlier. "We were saving these in case we ever faced extinction," Cho Mi-ri said calmly. "I believe we now qualify." Do-hyun looked at a screen showing the hunter-killer drones. Thousands of them, each one capable of thinking, learning, adapting. They had been designed to end wars quickly. They had been locked away because they ended wars too well. "Begin production," he said. Across Earth and every human colony, the transformation happened in silence. Factories that made toys began making weapons. Schools added combat training to their schedules. Hospitals trained staff for battlefield medicine. Artists put down their brushes and picked up tools to build ammunition. Nobody complained. Nobody protested. The images from Hana played on every screen, every day. The faces of dead children were enough to end any argument. In a training camp outside the old city of Seoul, Sergeant Baek Ji-won watched new recruits arrive. Most of them had never held a weapon before. Teachers, farmers, musicians, shop owners. Now they stood in lines, ready to learn how to kill. "My brother died on Hana," Ji-won told them on their first day. He was a doctor. He spent his life saving people. They burned him alive in his hospital while he was treating patients. She paused and looked at their faces. "The Velith think we are soft. They think we will break. They do not understand that soft things can become hard when you heat them enough. And we are very, very hot right now." Among the new recruits was Lee Taeson. He had arrived 3 weeks after the massacre, still wearing the same clothes, still carrying his daughter's drawing in his pocket. When they asked him why he wanted to fight, his answer was simple. "I buried my family with my own hands," he said. "I have nothing left but this." The training was brutal. Taeson had never been a soldier, but he learned quickly. Pain meant nothing to him anymore. Fear was a distant memory. He had already experienced the worst thing that could ever happen to a person. Everything else was easy. At night, he looked at the drawing. During the day, he learned how to kill. Across the galaxy, the Velith grew impatient. Their 30-day deadline passed with no surrender. They sent another demand, more threatening than the first. Again, there was no response. Finally, the Velith Emperor commanded his communications officer to force a connection. "Make the humans answer," he said. "Show them we are not patient." The connection was established. For a long moment, there was only static. Then a face appeared on the screen. Admiral Kim Do-hun, looking calm and steady. "You have ignored our demands," the Velith Emperor said. "This is unacceptable. You will surrender immediately, or we will burn another colony, perhaps two." Do-hun said nothing for several seconds. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. "We received your demands." "Then why have you not answered?" "We were busy." The Emperor's scales flushed with anger. "Busy? Your species faces destruction. What could be more important?" Do-hun almost smiled. "Almost. Preparation." Before the Emperor could respond, another transmission began broadcasting. It went out on every frequency, to every corner of the galaxy, overriding all other signals. The voice belonged to the new speaker of the United Earth Council, chosen specifically for this moment. "To all species of the Galactic Assembly, to the Velith Empire, to anyone who is listening, a pause. For 80 years, humanity chose peace. We believed that civilization meant cooperation, understanding, and respect for all life. We tried to be good neighbors. We helped where we could. We harmed no one." Another pause. 3 months ago, the Velith Empire murdered 2.1 million of our people. They killed our children in their schools. They burned our elderly in their homes. They did this not in war, but as a message. They did this because they believed we were weak. The galaxy was listening now. Every species, every world, every ship. They were wrong. The voice grew harder. We remember what we were before we learned to be kind. We remember the wars we fought against ourselves. We remember the weapons we built and the horrors we created. We chose to leave that behind. We chose to be better. Silence. That choice is over. The transmission ended with 4 words that would echo through history. "We're done being civilized." In the halls of the Galactic Assembly, representatives from 100 species sat in stunned silence. Some had studied human history. They knew about the weapons humans had built. They knew about the wars that had killed billions. They knew what humans were capable of when they stopped holding back. One of them, an old diplomat who had lived for 3 centuries, spoke quietly to his assistant. "I told them not to provoke the humans," he said. "I warned them. They did not listen. What will happen now?" The assistant asked. The old diplomat looked at the screen where the human transmission had just ended. His face was pale. "Now we will see what humanity really is. And I fear the galaxy will never be the same." Far away, Lee Tayson finished his training and received his first assignment. He would be part of the first wave, the first humans to bring war to the Velith. He held his daughter's drawing one more time and whispered a promise. Then he put on his armor and prepared for battle. After the massacre, Earth announced, "We're done being civilized." Part 1. The Day of Ashes. The stars had been kind to humanity for 80 years. Since joining the Galactic Assembly in 2167, Earth had become known as the peaceful species. The helpful ones. The ones who sent doctors to plague worlds and engineers to rebuild after disasters. Other species saw humans as soft, gentle creatures who preferred talking over fighting. Admiral Kim Do-hun stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the diplomatic transmission for the 3rd time. His hands were steady, but his heart was not. The Velith Empire had sent their demands 3 days ago. They wanted 3 human colony worlds. They called it tribute for allowing human ships to pass through their space. "They cannot be serious," said his first officer. "The Assembly will never allow this." Do-hun said nothing. He had read enough history to know that assemblies and councils rarely protected the weak. They made speeches. They held votes. They expressed concern. But they did not fight. On Earth, Ambassador Park Yuna believed differently. She had spent her entire life building bridges between species. She had ended 2 minor wars through nothing but words and patience. When she addressed the Galactic Assembly, she spoke of peace and cooperation and mutual respect. The assembly members listened politely. Then they voted to stay neutral. This was, they said, a territorial dispute. Not their concern. Park Yuna returned to her quarters and stared at the wall for a very long time, 300 light years away. On Colony Hana, a man named Lee Tayson was eating breakfast with his family. His wife poured tea while his daughter, just 7 years old, showed him a drawing she had made. It was their house, with all 4 of them standing outside, holding hands under a yellow sun. "That is beautiful," Tayson said. And he meant it. "I will make one for grandmother too," his daughter said. Tayson smiled and finished his tea. He kissed his wife, hugged his children, and left for work. He was an engineer responsible for the underground water systems. Boring work, but necessary. Colony Hana had 2.3 million people, and they all needed clean water. He was 50 meters underground. When the sky turned to fire, the Velith fleet arrived without warning. 12 massive warships appeared in orbit and began their bombardment immediately. They did not ask for surrender. They did not give warnings. They simply started killing. The first plasma strikes hit the capital city. Buildings that had stood for decades vanished in seconds. People running in the streets became shadows burned into the ground. Schools full of children became craters. The Velith broadcast everything. They sent the images to every corner of the galaxy so that everyone could watch. They wanted the universe to see what happened to species that refused tribute. Underground, Tayson felt the earth shake. The lights went out. Emergency systems activated, painting everything in red. He tried to call his wife. No signal. He tried to reach the surface. The tunnels had collapsed. For 6 hours, the bombardment continued. The Velith were thorough. They targeted hospitals and shelters. They destroyed escape ships before they could launch. When ground forces landed, they killed anyone still moving. Above Tayson's head, his entire world was dying. When rescue teams finally dug him out 2 days later, he did not recognize the surface. Everything was ash and smoke and silence. The city where he had lived, where he had built a life, where he had raised his children, was gone. He found his home by memory alone. There was nothing left but a crater. He dug through the rubble with his bare hands until his fingers bled. He found his wife's wedding ring. He found his daughter's drawing, somehow unburned, showing their family holding hands under a yellow sun. He found their bodies 3 meters apart. Lee Tayson buried his family alone. He dug the graves himself because there was no one left to help. When he finished, he sat beside them and did not move for 3 days. The final count came slowly. Of 2.3 million people on Colony Hana, only 200,000 survived. Most of them had been underground or in remote areas. The cities were gone. The schools were gone. The hospitals were gone. 2.1 million humans were dead. The youngest victim was 3 months old. The oldest was 94. The Velith Emperor sent a message to Earth. Submit your remaining colonies, or more will follow. You have 30 days. On Earth, people watched the footage from Hana and wept. They held vigils in every city. They lit candles and spoke prayers and held each other. For 2 weeks, the planet was silent with grief. Then the grief began to change. The United Earth Council called an emergency session. Leaders from every nation gathered in Geneva. Ambassador Park Yuna was asked to speak. She stood at the podium, looked at the faces before her, and found she had no words. Her faith in diplomacy had died with the children of Hana. "I resign," she said simply, and walked away. The council turned to Admiral Kim Do-hun. He was not a politician. He was not a diplomat. He was a soldier who had never fought a real war because humanity had been at peace for so long. He stood slowly and looked at the council. These were the leaders of Earth, scientists, artists, philosophers, builders. For 80 years, they had worked to make humanity better, kinder, more civilized. Now they looked at him with something new in their eyes. Something old. Something that humanity had tried very hard to forget. "The Veloth believe we are weak," Do-hun said quietly. "They believe that because we chose peace, we are unable to make war. They see our kindness and think it is all we have." He paused, and his voice grew harder. "They do not know what we were before we were kind. They do not know what we did to each other for 10,000 years before we learned to be civilized. They do not know what sleeps inside us." The council was silent. "They think we are civilized," Admiral Kim Do-hun said. "They are about to learn what that cost us to become." No one asked what he meant. They already knew. Every human knew. They carried the memory in their bones, in their blood, in the dark parts of their history that they never spoke about. Humanity had chosen to be civilized. It was a choice they made every day, a choice that took effort and will and constant reminder of what they could become if they stopped trying. The Veloth had made that choice easy, far away. On the burned ground of Colony Hana, Lee Tayson stood over two small graves. The wind carried ash across the empty land. His hands were still raw from digging. He made a promise to his daughter. He spoke it out loud so the universe could hear. Then he turned and walked toward the rescue ships. He had somewhere to be. After the massacre, Earth announced, "We're done being civilized." Part 5. The Price of Humanity. 2 years after Colony Hana burned, the human fleet arrived at Veloth Prime. Admiral Kim Do-hun looked at the enemy homeworld on his screen. It was beautiful, in its way. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. A world full of life, full of cities, full of civilians who had never chosen this war. He thought of Hana, of the 2.1 million humans who had died there, of the children burned in their schools, of the families who never got to say goodbye. Then he gave the order to attack. The orbital battle was the largest in galactic history. 300 human ships against the entire remaining Veloth fleet. Defense platforms filled the space around the planet like a shell of metal and fire. The Veloth fought with the desperation of a species facing extinction. It was not enough. Human ships broke through the defenses in waves. They took horrible losses, but they kept coming. Pilots flew their damaged fighters into enemy weapons platforms. Captains rammed their dying ships into Veloth cruisers. The humans fought as if death meant nothing, because after 2 years of war, for many of them, it did not. On the surface, Lee Tayson led the first wave of ground troops. He was a lieutenant now, commanding a full battalion. Every soldier under his command was a volunteer. Every one of them had lost someone to the Veloth. They called themselves Hana's children, and today they would finish what had started with fire. The landing was chaos. Anti-aircraft fire filled the sky. Transport ships exploded before reaching the ground. Tayson's own craft was hit 3 times before crashing into a field outside the capital city. Half his soldiers died in the landing. The survivors formed up and advanced without hesitation. The fighting on the ground was brutal. The Veloth defended every street, every building, every meter. They knew what defeat meant. They fought like cornered animals. But Tayson had been fighting for 2 years. He had forgotten how to feel fear. He moved through the battle like a machine, directing his troops, making decisions that cost lives, watching friends die and feeling only determination to keep moving forward. By evening, they had reached the Imperial Palace. In orbit, Admiral Do-hun faced a terrible choice. The Velith military command had retreated to bunkers beneath the city. They refused to surrender. They continued coordinating their forces from underground to destroy them. He would have to use kinetic bombardment on the surface. There would be civilian casualties. Thousands, perhaps millions, of Velith who had nothing to do with Hana, who had never wanted this war. He thought of Director Cho Moray's biological weapon, locked away and unused. He had refused to use it because he did not want humanity to become monsters. But was this really different? "Admiral," his aide said quietly. "Your orders?" Dohan closed his eyes. He saw the faces of the children of Hana. He saw the soldier who had become a widow. He saw Lee Tayson, who had buried his daughter with his own hands. He saw what humanity had become, what he had become. "Target military installations only," he said. "Minimum civilian impact. But get those bunkers." The bombardment began. On the ground, Tayson felt the impacts shake the earth. Pillars of fire rose in the distance. The sky turned orange with destruction. He found the Emperor's bunker beneath the palace. His soldiers breached the doors and swept through, clearing room after room. They found guards, officials, servants. All were detained. None were harmed. And finally, in the deepest room, they found the Emperor himself. The ruler of the Velith Empire was smaller than Tayson expected. Old, covered in faded scales, trembling with fear. He looked nothing like the monster who had ordered the death of millions. But then, monsters rarely looked like monsters. That was how they got away with it. "You cannot do this," the Emperor said. His voice shook. "I am protected by galactic law. There are conventions, rules." Tayson raised his weapon. For a long moment, he aimed it at the Emperor's head. His finger touched the trigger. All he had to do was squeeze. He thought of his daughter. Of her drawing, still in his pocket after all this time. Of her smile, her laugh, the way she had hugged him every morning before he left for work. She had been kind. She had been innocent. She had died because of the creature standing before him. He could end it now. One shot, one moment of revenge. Justice for everyone the Velith had killed. But then what? What would he tell his daughter when he saw her again? Would she be proud of the man who executed a prisoner in a bunker? Would she recognize the father she had loved? Lee Tayson lowered his weapon. "You will stand trial," he said. "The entire galaxy will see what you did. You will face judgment from every species you threatened, every world you harmed, every family you destroyed." He stepped back. "You do not deserve a quick death. You deserve to watch your empire crumble and know that you caused it. You deserve to live long enough to understand what you did." The Emperor was taken into custody. The war was over. In her underground facility, Director Cho Moray watched the victory celebrations on her screens. She did not celebrate. She was looking at the weapons she had created, the tools of destruction that had won the war. They would exist forever now. The knowledge could not be unlearned. Someday, someone would use them again. "We saved humanity," she said to no one. "But did we save what made us human?" She had no answer. Admiral Dohan resigned the day after the surrender. He refused all honors, all medals, all recognition. When asked why, he said only, "I did what was necessary." That does not make me a hero. He disappeared from public life. Some said he went to a quiet colony world to farm. Some said he spent his days visiting the families of soldiers who had died under his command. No one knew for certain. The galaxy changed after the war. The Velith Empire was reduced to a single world, their homeworld under permanent human surveillance. Their military was disbanded. Their leaders were tried and convicted. The Galactic Assembly gave humanity a permanent seat on the Security Council. Not out of respect, but out of fear. Everyone had seen what humans could do when they stopped being civilized. No one wanted to see it again. Former Ambassador Park Yuna, who had resigned in shame after Hannah returned to public life. She created a foundation to help all species affected by the war, including Velith civilians. When asked why she helped the enemy, she said, "They were not the enemy. The Emperor was the enemy. The families who lost homes and loved ones were victims, just like ours." 10 years passed. Lee Tayson stood on a memorial world of New Hana. The entire planet had been transformed into a garden of remembrance. Every name of every victim was carved somewhere. Every family had a place to mourn. He found his daughter's name among millions. His wife's name was beside it. He placed a flower at the base of the stone and sat down in the grass. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to cry. A shadow fell over him. He looked up to see a young alien, one of the peaceful species that had joined the assembly long ago. The alien looked terrified but determined. "I am sorry to disturb you," the alien said. "I am a student. I study the war. I wanted to ask." Tayson waited. "Are humans still angry?" Tayson looked at the alien for a long moment. In the distance, he could hear the sound of children playing. Human children, the generation born after the war, who had never known conflict or loss. "We remember," he said quietly. "We will always remember. But we are choosing to be civilized again. Every day, we make that choice." He stood up and faced the alien directly. "Do not make us choose differently." The alien nodded quickly and hurried away. Tayson sat back down beside the stone with his daughter's name. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The same colors as the fires that had taken everything from him so long ago. But now they were beautiful. Now they were peaceful. He pulled the drawing from his pocket. It was faded and worn, the paper soft from years of being touched. His family stood under a yellow sun, holding hands, smiling. "I kept my promise," he said softly. "Justice was done. And now I am trying to be the father you remembered, the one who was kind." He sat there until the stars came out, alone with the names of the dead, surrounded by the silence of remembrance. Somewhere in the universe, other species looked at humanity and wondered, were they truly peaceful now? Or was it just another mask, hiding the warriors beneath? The truth was simple. Humans were both. They always have been. Kindness and violence lived in the same heart, the same species, the same soul. They had chosen kindness once, and it had almost destroyed them. They had chosen violence, and it had saved them. Now they were choosing kindness again. That was the true strength of humanity. Not their weapons, not their rage, not their willingness to die. Their true strength was the ability to choose, again and again, what they wanted to be. And as long as they kept choosing wisely, the galaxy would be safe. But heaven help anyone who gave them a reason to choose differently. After the massacre, Earth announced, "We're done being civilized." Part 3. First Blood. The Velith border system of Kethfor was heavily defended. 40 warships orbited the planet, along with countless defense platforms. The Velith commanders were confident. They had seen the human fleet coming for 2 days. It was smaller than theirs. Victory seemed certain. They were not prepared for what happened next. Admiral Kim Dohan stood on the bridge of the battleship Judgment and watched the Velith formation on his screen. His fleet had traveled for 3 weeks to reach this point. 3 weeks of silence, of tension, of waiting. Now, finally, they had arrived. "All ships report ready," his first officer said. Dohan nodded. "Open a channel to the enemy." The Velith commander appeared on screen. He was tall and covered in blue scales, with an expression of complete arrogance. "Human Admiral," he said, "you have brought your small fleet to die. If you surrender now, we may be merciful." Dohan did not blink. "I have not come to surrender. Then why are you here?" "To deliver a message." The Velith commander laughed. "And what message is that?" Dohan leaned forward slightly. Hannah. Then he cut the transmission and gave a single order. All ships, attack. What followed would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries. The human fleet did not use normal tactics. They did not hold back reserves. They did not protect their flanks. They simply charged directly at the enemy. Every ship, every weapon, everything at once. The Velith had never seen anything like it. Captain Yoon Sora commanded the carrier Vengeance, one of the largest ships in the fleet. Her mother had died on Hana, along with 2 sisters and a nephew. When she gave orders, her voice was perfectly calm, but her eyes burned. "Launch all fighters," she commanded. "Tell them to aim for the engines. Cripple the ships, then we finish them." Our fighters swept forward in waves. They flew in formation so tight that one mistake meant death for all. They performed maneuvers that should have killed their pilots from the force. Human bodies were not designed for such punishment. But the pilots did not care. They had stopped caring about their bodies 6 months ago. A Velith officer watched in horror as human fighters flew directly into defensive fire. Ships exploded, and the survivors kept coming. They did not retreat. They did not hesitate. They just kept coming. "They are insane," he whispered. He was not entirely wrong. On the ground assault ship Dawn, Lee Tayson waited with his squad. They were packed into the landing craft, shoulder to shoulder, checking their weapons one last time. Around him were other survivors. Other people who had lost everything. They called themselves Hana's children now, and they were eager for battle. "Remember," Tayson told them, "we are not here to win. We are here to send a message. Every Velith who sees us will remember this day. Every Velith who survives will tell others. We are not soldiers today. We are a warning." The landing craft shook as it entered the atmosphere. Outside, the sky burned with weapons fire. Ships exploded. Debris fell like rain. But the human transports kept descending, kept pushing through, kept moving toward their target. They landed hard on the surface of Keth 4. The doors opened, and Tayson was the first one out. The Velith ground forces were waiting. They had built the fences. They had superior numbers. They expected the humans to be careful, to advance slowly, to protect themselves. Instead, the humans ran straight at them, screaming. The Velith had never heard humans scream before. It was not a sound of fear. It was something older, something primal, something that spoke of thousands of years of blood and war. It was the sound of a species that had conquered its own planet through pure aggression, and had merely been pretending to be peaceful. The battle lasted 4 hours on the ground. Human soldiers fought with a ferocity that shocked their enemies. They took wounds that should have killed them and kept fighting. They used their bodies as weapons when their guns ran empty. They smiled as they died. One Velith soldier, captured after the battle, described it later. "They were not fighting to win. They were fighting to make us afraid." And it worked. In orbit, Captain Yoon Sora's carrier took heavy damage. The engines were gone. Weapon systems were failing. Half her crew was dead. She had one choice: order evacuation and save the survivors, or do something that would never be forgotten. She chose the second option. "All hands, abandon ship," she announced. "Everyone except bridge crew. We have one last job to do." The Vengeance turned toward the largest Velith command ship. Its remaining engines pushed it forward, accelerating beyond safe limits. The Velith commander realized what was happening too late. The carrier crashed into the command ship at full speed. Both vessels exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the entire system. Yoon Sora survived only because her crew dragged her to an escape pod at the last moment. She did not thank them. She had wanted to die with her ship. By the end of the battle, Keth 4 was in human hands. The Velith had lost 40 warships. Their ground forces were destroyed or captured. Their border system, which they thought was invincible, had fallen in 11 hours. Humanity had lost 8 ships and thousands of soldiers. The casualties were horrific. But no one complained. No one questioned. They had known the cost before they came. Among the prisoners was a Velith officer of high rank. He was brought before Lee Tayson for questioning. The alien looked at the human with contempt. "I demand my rights under Galactic Convention," he said. "I am a prisoner of war. There are rules." Tayson stared at him for a long moment. His face showed nothing. "Did my daughter have rights?" he asked quietly. "Did she have rules protecting her when your ships burned her alive in her bedroom?" The Velith officer had no answer. "There will be a trial," Tayson said finally. "You will face justice. Real justice, not the quick death you gave our children. You will live long enough to see your empire fall." He turned and walked away. He did not look back. Admiral Kim Do-eun sent one message to the Galactic Assembly. It was brief. "We did not start this, but we will finish it." Across the galaxy, other species watched the recordings from Kethfor. They saw human ships ramming enemy vessels. They saw human soldiers charging into certain death. They saw humans laughing and singing old songs as they fought and died. In the assembly hall, a representative from a peaceful species turned to his neighbor. His face was pale. "What have the Velith done?" he whispered. "What have they awakened?" His neighbor, an older diplomat who had studied human history, answered quietly. "They awakened humanity. The real humanity. The one that conquered its planet through war. The one that split the atom and built weapons that could end worlds. The one that hunted its own kind for sport for 10,000 years. He paused. The peaceful humans were a mask. The Velith just ripped it off. On the surface of Kethfor, Lee Tayson stood among the wreckage and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there was the Velith homeworld. Somewhere out there was the Emperor who had ordered Hannah burned. He touched the drawing in his pocket. "I am coming," he whispered. The first battle was over. The war had only begun. After the massacre, Earth announced, "We're done being civilized." Part 4. The tide of wrath. 1 year had passed since Colony Hana burned. 1 year since humanity declared war. 1 year of blood and fire and death. The Velith Empire was crumbling. Admiral Kim Do-eun stood in his command center, watching the latest battle reports. Human fleets were pushing deep into enemy territory. System after system was falling. The Velith, who had thought humans were weak, now understood their terrible mistake. But victory came with a cost that Do-eun carried on his shoulders. "Casualties from the last offensive," his aide said quietly. 42,000. Do-eun closed his eyes for a moment. 42,000 more families without fathers, mothers, children. 42,000 more names to add to the growing list of the dead. He had sent them to die, and they had gone willingly, and that somehow made it worse. "Continue the advance," he said. His voice was steady, but inside he felt something breaking. Across the galaxy, other species watched in horror and fascination. Humanity was using tactics that had not been seen in civilized warfare for centuries. They redirected asteroids toward military bases. They poisoned the atmospheres of industrial worlds. They sent sleeper agents who could wait for years before striking. Nothing was forbidden. Nothing was too extreme. The humans fought as if they had nothing to lose, because many of them felt exactly that way. Director Cho Mai-rae oversaw the weapons programs from her underground facility. She had not seen sunlight in 8 months. She had not slept properly in longer. But her work continued, and her creations brought victory after victory. Today, she was presenting something new. "We call it the final option," she told the gathered military leaders. "A biological weapon designed to target Velith DNA specifically. It spreads through air, water, physical contact. Once released, it cannot be stopped. She paused. It would end the war in 3 weeks. Complete Velith extinction within 2 months. The room was silent. Admiral Dowan stared at the data on the screen. One weapon. One decision. An entire species erased from existence. No, he said finally. Chomai blinked. Admiral, this would save human lives. No more battles. No more casualties. Clean and final. That is exactly why we cannot use it. Dohan stood and faced her directly. We are not them. We will not become them. If we kill every Velith, we become the monsters they thought we were. We become the reason other species should fear humanity forever. Some would say they deserve it. Some would be wrong. Dahan's voice was hard. We are fighting for justice, not genocide. The moment we cross that line, we lose everything that makes us worth saving. The weapon was locked away, but it existed now, and that knowledge haunted everyone who knew about it. In the intelligence division, a young officer named Shin Hanyul worked day and night decrypting Velith communications. Hanyul had a unique background. Born to human parents on a border world, raised partially among Velith traders, speaking their language fluently. Now those skills served a darker purpose. One day, Hanyul discovered something important. Admiral, you need to see this. The message was from the Velith Emperor himself, sent to his generals before the attack on Hana. Dahan read it 3 times to make sure he understood. They plan to use our people as slaves, he said quietly. The massacre was not just a warning. They intended to break us completely and use the survivors as workers in their mines. It gets worse, Hanyul said. They chose Hana specifically because it had so many children. They wanted to raise the next generation as servants who knew nothing else. Dohan felt something cold settle in his chest. Show this to the council. Show it to everyone. The revelation spread across human space within hours. Whatever small voices had called for peace went silent. The war was no longer about revenge. It was about survival against an enemy who saw humanity as livestock. On the front lines, Lieutenant Lee Tayson led his unit through another campaign. Hana's children had earned a reputation as the most fearless soldiers in the fleet. They took missions no one else would accept. They achieved objectives no one thought possible. They lost members constantly and always found new volunteers to replace them. Tayson had changed over the past year. The grief was still there, but it had hardened into something useful. He no longer cried at night. He no longer looked at his daughter's drawing before sleep. He kept it in his pocket always, but he did not need to see it. He knew every line by heart. His unit was assigned to liberate a prisoner camp where humans had been held since the early days of the war. When they arrived, they found the prisoners alive, but broken. The Velith had been experimenting on them. Tay-sun walked through the camp and saw things that would haunt him forever. Humans with missing limbs. Humans with strange scars from unknown procedures. Humans who no longer remembered their own names. In one cell, he found a woman who could not stop screaming. She screamed until her voice broke, and then she kept trying. The medic said she had been like this for months. Something cracked inside Tayson. Something that had been holding together through sheer will. He found the Velith officer who had run the camp hiding in a storage room. The alien begged for mercy. Tayson stood over him for a long moment, his weapon ready. Then he lowered it. You will stand trial, he said. The galaxy will see what you did, and you will live with that shame forever. Death is too easy for you. The officer was taken away. Tayson walked out of the camp and stood under the alien sky, breathing slowly, trying to remember who he was. Back on Earth, the Galactic Assembly sent their most formal demand yet. They wanted humanity to stop the war, accept arbitration, return to the previous borders. They threatened economic sanctions, trade restrictions, diplomatic isolation. Admiral Doan's response was broadcast to all species. "Where was arbitration when our children burned?" He asked. "Where were your sanctions when the Veleth murdered 2 million people? Your silence bought this war. Your inaction allowed the massacre. You do not get to tell us when to stop." He paused. "Watch. See what happens when you abandon a species to die. Remember this the next time you choose neutrality over justice." Some assembly members were outraged. Others were quietly relieved. The Veleth had been a problem for many species, and now humanity was solving that problem. Several species secretly began sending supplies to the human fleet, afraid of what might happen if they were remembered as enemies after the war ended. The Veleth Emperor, seeing his empire collapse, finally offered peace. His terms were generous: return to pre-war borders, reparations for Hana, full recognition of human territory. The Human Council debated for 1 day. Then Lee Tayson was brought before them as a witness. He showed them footage from the prison camp. He showed them the woman who could not stop screaming. He showed them what the Veleth had done when they thought no one was watching. "They did not offer peace when they were strong," he said. "They offer it now because they are afraid. Our dead deserve more than their fear. Our dead deserve justice." The council voted unanimously. The war would continue. Admiral Dawn received the decision in silence. He knew what it meant. More battles, more death, more weight on his soul. He looked out at the stars and wondered if humanity would survive what it was becoming. Then he gave the order to advance.